Ready. Welcome everyone. I'm Roberta Panjwani, the coordinator of the 18th Annual Real Voices Film Festival. And I want to thank our Friends of the Library organization for supporting the festival for the past 18 years and just for sponsoring amazing films like this and the opportunity to have these forums for discussion and connection and action, hopefully. So I cannot think of a better film to begin this 2021 with. So I had seen The Antidote this past fall, and my colleague and friend Larissa Brooks, who lives in Montclair, saw the film and the Q&A at the Montclair Film Festival, and she just came in the next day and she said, I said, how was it? And she said, I just cried the entire film. And I said, that's amazing. That's exactly that's a criteria for a lot of the films that we show and are moved by. So I want to thank Larissa for introducing me to the film, and I immediately got on it. And I'm just so fortunate to have you both here tonight. So audience, the reason you can't be seen is because we're doing this as a webinar format tonight. So we can see your comments, and we are really going to look forward to hearing your thoughts about the film and having you have an opportunity to ask questions. I'm actually, after I speak with John and Kahane at the very beginning, I'll turn on your microphone so you're able to ask questions out loud too. And then please put the questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that we have those questions answered. And our friends always give an honorarium to the speakers, and our directors just now said, you know what, we want to donate our honorariums back to the library. So that is kindness in action right there. That's the fierce power that they have. So thank you both so much for that. That's incredibly generous and meaningful, and we just thank you for that. So I'm just going to introduce our directors, and then we're going to get to an initial question, and then we look forward to having a conversation over the next 30 or 40 minutes. Kahane Cooperman is a documentary filmmaker and television producer. She directed and produced the 2017 Academy Award nominated short called Joe's Violin. I ran an Oscar poll, so I remember that one very well. And for her work on The Daily Show and others, she received 11 Primetime Emmy Awards and 3 Peabody Awards. John Hoffman is the winner of 8 Emmy Awards and 25 nominations. And one of the projects that I found very striking in your bio was the Alzheimer's Project, the HBO film and accompanying book that was incredibly powerful. So we'd love to hear about that later today too. So I hope you all had a chance to see this film. It is just about everyday people who make the intentional choice of lifting others up and just believing in the idea that the fact that all life is equal in worth. And after the events of yesterday and the last 4 years and beyond, I think now is the time to really focus on that and to just know the power we have in making thousands of decisions every single day. So I just wanted to ask you both to just start by just talking about the genesis of this film and the 6 questions I know that you like to talk about in how you kind of define the concept and reality of kindness and how you chose the stories for this film.
Sure. Well, maybe I'll start. And first, I just want to thank you, Roberta, and the Ridgewood community for inviting us in. And I think Kahane will join me in saying that this is the first time we're talking about it, obviously, since the events of yesterday. And it's as we have worked on the Antidote over the past 3 years now, we were inspired and we were motivated to make this film because of dramatic changes that we felt were happening in this country that really were challenging for us as individuals, and we'll both speak to that. But at certain points along the way, the challenges increased, and they really made us think about the creative direction we were going to go, and we'll talk about some of those issues as we were making the film, but then even as the film came into the world. And we didn't know whether this film would be relevant in a COVID world when it was made before COVID. And then we felt, okay, we think it will be important for people to see because of so much of the inequities and the isolation that people were feeling. And then George Floyd was murdered, and we said, will this film be relevant in a post-George Floyd murder environment, and how will the messages and the themes that we deal with in the film work in a post-George Floyd murder? And then yesterday, Connie and I were having conversations like, how
all over again.
all over again, like how will our film resonate, and will people feel that the film is more or less relevant and more or less helpful to grapple with these issues? So that's why we're particularly interested in this conversation. I'm so glad to be having it today. So how did this film happen? I was very fortunate to have a relationship with the major funder of the film, which is a nonprofit health system that had supported some public health media that I had done about over the course of my career, and they helped get a nonprofit going that's I founded that's very devoted to public health. They have a very strong commitment to kindness as being fundamental to good care. And I just made a remark to them: would you be interested in supporting a film on kindness? Because I felt like this might be an unexpected way of looking at this country at a time when there was so much rise in hate and divisiveness. And they were remarkably generous. And that I knew I wanted to make this film with someone. I wanted to have a thought partner, a creative partner. And I talked with many fellow filmmakers, and two highly respected, accomplished filmmakers, Fisher Stevens and Dawn Porter, both said, you've got to talk to Kahane Cooperman. And so we had breakfast, and I explained this opportunity that was so unusual that we're going to make a film about kindness, and I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how we're going to make it. And I have a good chunk of money just on that word, and the full editorial control, which is what the only way we would ever be willing to make a film. And I'll let Kahane take it from there.
So yeah, I met John for the first time through these mutual filmmakers, and this was 2018. And I can, just speaking for myself, but I know John expressed, he's kind of in the same vein. I was very concerned about this pervasive feeling of crumbling civility everywhere. I was confused by it almost. I'm like, I don't understand, like, what is this? I don't recognize it as the place that I've grown up in. I mean, I'm not naive. I knew there were a million problems and all that stuff, but I just felt like it was so blatant and so out there, and I was very concerned. So when this opportunity comes to make a film about this one word kindness at this time in 2018 in this country, I thought, what an interesting opportunity to look at what that is and what that tells us about ourselves and what it means, that aspect of humanity and that aspect of, is that important to a civil democracy, which of course it is. And so we partnered up, and I'm so glad I did. I'd heard about John, but I had never met him through his, films and positions at networks. And, we got in a room when slowly brought in a few other people, but we tried to learn everything we could. I mean, we read everything that's out there in this realm. We talked to everyone, from the worlds of religion, evolutionary biology, philosophy, academia all over the place, poetry, art. We were just everywhere trying to explore this aspect of humanity. What does it mean? Is it primal? Is it learned? What is this about how we treat each other? And it was really fascinating. And it was also completely overwhelming because we just had so much input coming in. And so at some point we just were like, we have to just, this is almost too much. We have to kind of, it's great to know it all, but let's put it aside now and really try to break down for ourselves what's most important to us about this film, however we're going to make it. And that is how we, you know, arrived at these 6 questions that you referenced at the beginning of this conversation. And we asked ourselves, you know, when we make this film and it's done, what will we have wanted to explore in terms of like the human experience, and what do we all share and what connects us? And the 6 questions we came up with that we knew our film wanted to look at was what were very basic questions, but actually ultimately very profound and in their own way. And it's, how do we raise our children? How do we teach our children? How do we live and work together? How do we take care of the sick and dying? How do we welcome the stranger? And how do we lead? And we felt like when we looked at those questions that one, they sort of, you know, give us an opportunity to cover the entire lifespan, which is something that, you know, if we're all lucky enough, we all get to experience. And it also really presented an opportunity to navigate the worlds that almost everyone has in common. So that was like a great place to start to look for the kinds of stories. We kind of agreed early on it couldn't just be one story to address this. It needed to be more of a chorus, more of an essay, more of a chorus. So we started thinking about those, and then Charlottesville happened, another day like yesterday that was just like a moment of reckoning. And that, you know, really shook us. And I'll throw it to John, but it really shook our foundation and made us have some very strong realizations about some other things that this film had to address at the same time. Yeah.
So the incident, the Charlottesville incident, really made us realize that it was not enough just to ask these questions. And we had to find stories that were not only looking at how do we raise our children, or how do we take care of our, how do we teach our children, how do we take care of the sick and the dying, but they had to be in response to what we came to call fundamental unkindnesses. And so we thought long and hard about that, and we realized, came up with 4 fundamental unkindnesses. That it's fundamentally unkind to not have a safe place to sleep. It's fundamentally unkind to not be paid a living wage. It's fundamentally unkind to not have access to healthcare. And the injustices of racism and sexism and homophobia are all just fundamentally unkind. And that these are longstanding. These are not unkindnesses that have emerged in the past 4 years, that we have grappled with this as a nation, all these issues for generations. And so we decided that we would look at America through this sort of multifaceted lens, and look for stories that, as you said, Roberta, about efforts to lift others up. But it's lifting others up who are struggling because at the effect of these fundamental unkindnesses. And that became the way that we looked at, you know, what you could say are, you know, it's millions of potential stories that could be in this film. But it focused our thinking so so well, and so that's how the stories that everyone, you know, witnessed in the film were found.
Right. And I love how when you were talking about covering the generations from birth to older age, you know, the film right begins with the teaching of empathy through the baby.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And that whole thing, and then the intergenerational story where you see the effect of young people on seniors, and how, like, if people are not feeling that connection, how do you know, they kind of accidentally fell into that, but how do we get people to feel empathy for one another and to feel responsible for one another. You know, that wonderful story about the doctor, Dr. Jim O'Connell in Boston, right? He did that internship at the beginning of his career, is that correct?
Yeah.
Where he was serving the homeless, and then his whole world changed because of the power of just, you know, the scenes of washing those human beings' feet. And it was very, it was incredibly humbling and powerful. And that was the entree, right? To get them into the healthcare and the basic needs so that they felt like the human beings and everything else they needed beyond the basics of healthcare.
Yeah, that kind of design of, you know, I mean, there's biblical aspects, but you're at the feet of the person you serve, but also you're not looking down at them.
Right.
They're almost in like the power position, and you're using their names, and that is not something that this population is used to. And the most important thing, and this is common throughout the stories in this film, is that it establishes trust. And if you can establish trust, then you're in a much better position for people to allow you to help them if they need it. And that's certainly with the homeless population in Boston, what's going on there. It's all about trust. And you start with this soaking of the feet, but that's, as the nurse Cecilia said, who I love, it's the gateway. It's the gateway to comprehensive care for a population that doesn't trust people, and for good reason. So it's really amazing as a model. Yeah. And
the story with the refugees from the Congo, that was incredible. So when we're thinking about reactions to horror and violence, and people, like, obviously people who did what they did yesterday are feeling powerless in many ways, right? They are full of anger and rage, and like, why would anyone do that? They're feeling, you know, like it's hard to even try to get into the minds and try to feel empathy or understanding, or where do we even begin with that? We can't fight that with rage. So a very simplistic question, like what is a reaction where we can take some of the lessons drawn in using the fierce power and intentionality of kindness that you talk about in this film? Like, how can we respond? We're obviously not going to get on Facebook and fight with people and engage in conversations, because that never ends well. Like, what is a very thoughtful, intelligent, proactive response? Family, friends, you know, when these conversations are going to come up in the next few years.
Well, I think that what I hope the first response that people have is to move through their community, maybe with a different pair of glasses on, that they are able to see the forces for good in their community and recognize them and their existence in ways, because they maybe just haven't thought about, you know, their importance as much as maybe they do now after seeing the film. If people come away from this film realizing that these forces for good that they saw in the film are in their communities, it's incredibly important to us. It was incredibly important as part of the creative execution of this film. The drone shots where we're flying over America, and then it's almost like you're going down into the community, that, you know, when we took off again, you could have gone to the next community and found more stories like that. And that we do want people to feel that the people they meet in this film are in their community. They are in all of our communities. But we need to honor them, and we need to support them, and we need to you know, cherish them. And I think that we all become more compassionate people by doing so, and learning from them, and you know, making their part of the community part of our community, experience the community. So that's my first response to what you said.
Right, exactly.
I also think that, I mean, there's a few things. Well, one is, I think there's a great example in the film through Sherry McIntyre, the teacher in Modesto, California, who's teaching world religion, a required for graduation world religion class to 9th graders. And I mean, those kids are learning to be more respectful people by learning about other people, simply education. It's like a book and a teacher. And I think like we can all do better learning about, other people. And that I think there is a natural arc that happens to people when you just open your mind and your hearts to them. We also, on a really practical way, try to make that action like easy when you've watched this film, and hopefully your emotions are high, or you're like, what can I do? We have a website which I'll put into the chat, the address, but if you go there and you click on Get Involved, we have a partnership with volunteermatch.org. And volunteermatch.org has been this incredible partner to this film. And if you click on it, there's like a whole portal for our film. And you basically just have to put in your zip code, and you can also put in your areas of interest, whether it's like education or whatever it is. And they will tell you all the organizations that are in your own community where there's possibilities of helping out. So we try to make it easy. You have thank you for putting the web address in there, the antidotemovie.com. So we try to do a practical thing. I mean, there's also examples of one woman who watched the film early on, changed the way she interacts with the homeless guy who she used to walk by every single day on her way to work through her park in Brooklyn. And she went from avoiding that person to actually striking up a conversation and finding out about that person's life. And she's like, it changed my life. Like my daughter now knows that person. And, it's just that little thing. Exactly. Another woman who watched the film, everyone takes their own thing from it, but she had she's not a wealthy woman, but she had a teeny bit of money that she inherited from her late mother. And she decided, after seeing this film, she was especially moved by the Amarillo community college story. And she got back in touch with a place in Pennsylvania that she taught in like 10 years ago. And she set up a scholarship in her late mother's, who was an immigrant from Poland, her late mother's name, for single moms trying to get an education. And so this little bit, it's not a ton of money, but like there's just little creative ways you can think about that might make a huge impact in someone's life.
Exactly.
Yeah. The ripple effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I turned off the mute for everybody. So if any attendees would like to ask a question out loud, or if you want to put it in the chat, we'd love to hear from you. Kathy, I think you might have had a question.
It looks like everyone's muted.
Oh, everyone. Oh, I think I allowed everyone to talk. I was trying to go through everybody. I apologize, everyone. This is the first time I'm doing the webinar format. So let me see.
You can unmute.
Unmute yourself, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, people. So I've allowed everyone to talk. So if you unmute yourselves, then you're able to talk. Okay, go ahead, Susan.
I have a question in regards to yesterday. I know that these people are upset because I try to see it on both sides, not just I try to see it as the pro-Trumpers as well as the people that understand, that I think are a bit more stable. But they have no regrets to what they did. They thought what they did was justified. They thought what they did was lawful. They have no regrets. As the president seems, he still has no regrets to what he did. And how do you speak to someone like that about kindness, about respect, about the qualities that you want children to understand, when these people themselves, when they even look back in hindsight, don't realize what they did was wrong?
That's a really great question. I've been asking myself that same question, and I have 2 teenage kids, and I'm always wondering, like, you know, do you have to understand everybody? Like some people, you know, I mean, I'm not saying that you don't, but I'm just like, wow, like, you know, it's hard not to, it can be hard to feel any kind of empathy when people, you know, behave in a lawless manner. So you know, I don't have an answer to that question. It's a fantastic question. But I do, like, I have this dream that the Biden administration will appoint like a unity czar, basically. And I dream of like this, you know, team of people that somehow, if there's such a thing anymore, are deemed nonpartisan, who can be influential and who create opportunities for conversation, because I just think that's the only way we're going to start to understand each other and people. And one of my ideas is that one of those people should be Dolly Parton, but that's just one of my thoughts. But I don't have an answer. I just know we all have to communicate and talk, even if it seems like the last thing we want to do.
Right.
And unimaginable that we could ever find common ground. I just have to believe it's there somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a question from Amy. How are the groups and individuals in the film doing with regard to COVID?
It's a great question. We have had wonderful contact with everyone who's in the film, and thankfully, all the communities that everyone met tonight are fine. The homeless population in Boston is probably the most vulnerable of all the stories in the film.
Yeah.
And there have been there's a relatively high infection rate, but Jim O'Connell is reporting that that everyone's okay, that they've not struggled with severe illness.
Yeah. I know Sherry McIntyre, the teacher in Modesto, just went back to in-school class for the first time today, and she posted a picture on social media that had, you know, that very desk that you all see in the classroom now has a big plexiglass partition around it, and the students are actually facing, it was interesting, their backs are facing her. I don't know if that's part of it, but very unusual. I think, you know, our Biker Boys and Girls shop in Indianapolis, that community has been hit hard. There's no one in the film that you meet who they're all doing okay. But it was a hard summer and a hard year for that community, for sure.
Amy is asking specifically about the Center for Discovery, and what
we
learned is that they all got vaccinated.
Oh, wonderful.
And Anderson Cooper did a story on them getting vaccinated the other night.
That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, they're doing really well. They had no COVID. They had, I think, 2 cases of COVID and no COVID deaths.
It's amazing.
So that's pretty amazing. They were really careful. Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the Boys and Girls Club. Just that whole concept of mentorship. And I know the Obamas have been so instrumental in that with the foundation. Can you talk about that? Like, I think, it's like giving people that second chance, right? You have somebody like the gentleman, what was his name again? Yeah, amazing, just amazing. Yeah. But like, just to know that there's one person out there that believes in you and is going to give you that second chance and trust you, and then you can feel empowered by whether, fixing bikes and giving people the opportunity to get to work, right? I mean, bikes are really incredibly instrumental. So, just with mentorship, I think that's just a great concept with kindness and advocacy and, intentionality.
Well, Diamond is inspiring so many people. I mean, he has hopefully so many more communities will reach out to him to learn his sort of philosophy of empowerment, and
Mhm.
he is he's just a brilliant community organizer, in that his whole philosophy is finding people's strengths, and celebrating their strengths,
Yeah.
not trying to repair their weaknesses. He's trying to identify their strengths and celebrate their strengths, and we all have different strengths. And it's just a shift. It's just a simple shift in his thinking, and that happened in his journey, in trying to do what he could for his community, that he just made that change in his orientation, from asking people, what do you need, to what do you have to give, and it's transforming in people's lives.
Exactly. That's a great point.
It transforms. Just repositioning that question transforms how people see themselves and what their abilities are to contribute. And that can change everything. And I learned so much from him. I mean, I learned so much from a lot of the people in the stories, but that particular idea of, instead of what do you need, what can you give, is really looms large for me.
Exactly.
And also, his title within his community through the church that he started out with is the Roving Listener. And when you go on his website, like, that's what his title says.
Yeah.
And in our opening scene of that story, where you see these lovely young girls like knocking on the neighborly doors, and they pick him up to walk to the bike shop. I love their walk and the questions he's asking them about what has your mom taught you, and how he's listening. He's really, it seems like a casual conversation, but it's very calculated and very intentional. He's listening to them, and the way he gives them the space to answer and the way he responds, I just find that so magical every time. And I learned a lot from that moment, and about, his statement that telling stories is a philanthropic act. And I feel like and I agree with that. And I think listening to people's stories is so powerful, because you're allowing them to tell it, not just because you're getting to hear it, but you're allowing them to tell it. Yeah.
And you're not giving answers. It's not about you, right? You're not feeling like you need to give any input.
Exactly.
That creative listening.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions, Mark, our attendees? Kind of miss not having everyone's lovely face now. I'm going to do a meeting next time.
I mean, one thing regarding COVID was, I was really concerned about how it would, I wondered how the Congolese family in Alaska was doing with that. And they're all doing very well. And Grandma, who was 103 when we, said she was 103 when we shot our film, but soon after found out she was actually 104. So she's like 106 now. And she's still cruising around and healthy, especially COVID wise. And, wow, like, it's because they're all taking care of each other there, and it's so great. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I do love, and the story in Georgia, at the Southern Baptist Church, that was just a fantastic story. The Christian ethicist. What was his name again? Yes.
David Gushy.
Yes. Talk a little about him. He was incredible.
Well, David Gushy, we found after a rather lengthy search to find someone who is working in the religious community to bring a much more progressive sort of effort at inclusion within organized religion. And we felt that with one of our questions being, or one of our fundamental unkindnesses being, that homophobia is fundamentally unkind. We wanted to have an LGBTQ story. Anyway, so we, after rather a lengthy search, we did identify David, who is within the Baptist world, He is the author of the textbook that is the most widely used textbook in Baptist colleges. He wrote the text. He subscribed to this very conservative view of homosexuality being a sin, and the Bible says it. And after understanding that he had a sister who was a lesbian, and after really stopping to ask, what was the foundation for this bias? He had done his doctoral dissertation about the Holocaust and about the way that the Bible was used and subverted as justification by the Germans for the Holocaust. And he started saying, I think that I might have really been an active participant in perpetuating a really wrong interpretation and use, harmful use of biblical text as what he says in the film, a weapon of mass destruction. So that his church, he has been a leader in that church, and because of their efforts at inclusion, racial inclusion, and LGBTQ inclusion, they are no longer part of the Southern, I just blanked on that.
Southern Baptist Convention.
Southern Baptist Convention, which is
they got booted out.
Booted out. So they are part of a different organization of Baptist churches, but these are traditionally very, very conservative churches. So it was a riveting experience being in that community in the time that we were there, and to be invited into a community that is actively changing. They are far along in their journey, but they are still on a journey to become a more inclusive community. And it was part of making filmmaking. Probably the most essential part of documentary filmmaking is access. Access is trust, but people have to let you into their lives. So many, if not all, the stories are about populations that you could say are vulnerable populations, whether they're young, and you have to be very, very mindful of how you include youth in a film, or they're very old, or they're refugees. I mean, you think that all those populations in some ways are vulnerable. But in this instance, this was a community of people that are willing to talk about their sexual identity in a very public way in a national program. So they had to feel very, very secure, and David Gushee really enabled that on our behalf.
Yeah. One wonderful update that, John, I don't think you know about, but there's a minor character, but important character in that story of in Georgia, Jamie, a young trans man, and you meet Jamie's parents, and we go to their house, and Jamie's mom told me recently that Jamie just got married in November at that church. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's pretty major. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. I'm happy for them. I noticed in questions that there's 2 questions from Kathy Cowie.
Yeah. So Kathy's asking, is there a way we can donate to the Amarillo program?
Absolutely. And so if you go to the website, which is theantidotemovie.com, you can find out about every organization and every story that's part of the film. And so if you click on the Amarillo College one, you can see how you can help there. But they have something called the Amarillo College Foundation that is a great one of the ways that the college community, as opposed to the outside community of Amarillo, which is very important to that story, helps all of their students. So it's on the website. I'm sorry. Then she asked if, how did the family from the Congo get to Alaska? Yeah.
That's
it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's actually relatively simple that the United Nations manages the global relocation of refugees. And it's a relatively complicated sort of qualification to be recognized as a refugee by the world community. It
A
is
single-digit percentage
Yeah.
of people that actually get refugee status.
You're displaced to another country from your country, and then you're going to be relocated, and you're displaced because of war, because of civil unrest and the danger that you have had to flee your country. And then the United Nations decides, amongst all the countries that participate in this program, where you go. If you have a living relative that has been resettled ahead of you, you will be relocated to that country and every effort will be that you get reunited with your family. So the Congolese family that you get to know, it goes by relatively quickly, but Ndukunde, who is one of the young men in that family, he and his mother and his 4 siblings were all relocated to Anchorage. And that's why their grandmother, their 104-year-old grandmother, and her daughter, their aunt, arrives there. And so over time, that Congolese community has grown because of the connections, and the refugee resettlement program tries to foster that sort of community and family sort of cohesion. So that's
right. But they are all originally from the Congo, but they actually, come from Rwandan refugee camps where they all lived for 17 years. Wow. So they came from Rwanda by way of the refugee camp to Alaska, which you can imagine, just the cultural shift of that, which is one of the reasons why we were drawn to that particular place. Like the cinematic opportunities seemed, incredible, just to show that juxtaposition and contrast. But we also, we shot 400 hours of footage. You saw an hour and 40 minutes of it. Like there were so many deeply moving moments in Alaska with those people, and I wish everyone could see all of them, but I was bawling my eyes out multiple times there.
Well, I know it's come up many times that this could have easily been a series on Netflix or something. Like each episode could have easily contained some of these individual stories, but it also works so beautifully together as one cohesive film.
We would be open to doing a series having done this, but this is a film in which the sum was by design meant to be greater than the parts. Hopefully everybody felt that way, that we were saying that the pieces not only spoke to each other, but then they all together said something unique as one whole piece. And we were saying from the very beginning of our filming, and we would meet these people and come back and start reflecting more on what we're trying to accomplish here, that we want people to watch the film and say, this is who we are. And to Susan's point about what's happened yesterday and what we're living through right now, we were having this feeling like this is not who we are. This is not our country. And that these people that we're meeting and we're going into these communities and we're coming away saying, this is who we are. And so hopefully that's part of what everybody experienced, and I'm curious if it is helping people cope with the emotion of the past.
Exactly. We have let's see.
There's a couple questions in the chat.
Yeah. So Amy's saying, I wonder if there are any intergenerational living foster care programs on the East Coast. What a great idea. How does it work?
Yeah. There
are 6 communities. They are not part of one organization. They all are completely independent, but they have learned from each other as models of intergenerational living. There is, I'm blanking on the name.
Treehouse.
A treehouse community that is both in the suburban Boston area and in North Hampton, Massachusetts. they have relatively long-standing communities in those two areas. There's one in Florida. I don't remember exactly. I think it's in the Tampa area. And there's one in on a sort of decommissioned military base outside of Chicago, and that was the very first one. And they have this innovative idea that, you know, if you have low-income publicly supported housing for the elderly, and you have low-income publicly supported housing for foster families, put them together, and, you know, what kind of magic will happen. And as I hope everyone saw in the film, there's some really great magic that happens. And, you know, we hope that there's a ton more communities that get inspired.
Yeah. One other, for that story, I think one other really interesting and an important note is that the story we filmed is in Portland, Oregon. And the city of Portland, the government, you know, saw that this was a good idea. And so they lease that land and the structures on it for $1 a year for 99 years. And so I think that's one, incredible, but two, it's also a way to show that like governments and, you know, can do all kinds of things like that are kind, that help people in their community, that really address the you know, very, very essential needs. And I love how, you know, the city of Portland they identified a good idea, and they're like, what can we do to help make this happen?
They did it because there was a 60 Minutes story about the Chicago one, and a city councilman in Portland saw that story 60 Minutes and said, we're doing that here.
Yeah, why don't we have that here?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We have Susan is, you know, we talking about how the Ridgewood school system really values kindness and teaches it. Asking, can portions of the film be used to help teach kindness in schools, especially the portions that are profiled that pertain to families and children. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Got it. We love that. There is an educational distribution company for school systems that are, you know, going to, you know, use the film. There's a curriculum that goes along with that. Their company is called ROCO, R-O-C-O.
Yeah.
And so if the Ridgewood School District would like to use the film, there's a whole, you know, very, very well-established, you know, system of getting films into schools that ROCO is a part of.
And that's who I worked with to get in touch with both of you, and they're wonderful to work with.
Okay, good.
Oh, good.
And I'm going to, and then Harriet is thanking both of you for creating such an inspiring and uplifting film. I will second that. I'm just going to put the, in the chat here, I'm just putting the website for Real Voices as well. So that also connects with, with John and Kahane and the Antidote movie film website. And also next Friday, we're showing a film for the MLK weekend, Through a Lens Darkly, and that's all about the African-American experience through the eyes of Black photographers, and it's incredibly powerful. And Reverend Professor Mac Brandon will be with us next Friday, so please, you know, take a moment to register for that if you're available to come. Do we have any more questions before we turn in?
I'd love to add one other detail.
Please do.
I feel like I keep mentioning our website.
Oh, please,
but,
please.
You know, we did shoot 400 hours of footage, and we actually shot more stories than could fit in the film, and as hard as we tried. And so these stories are as powerful, I think, as everything you see in the film, but for balance and all kinds of reasons, we, you know, had to make some hard decisions. So we took those, we turned them into short films. So if you go to the website, just anyone can go, it's a free viewing. There's 4 really, you know, powerful, we think, short films on there that are all in the same spirit of everything you saw in the film. And they're all about, you know, people doing really everyday people doing inspiring things to help others, just like these are. And so should you have a need for a little more, or who knows what'll happen in the news tomorrow, you might need a little escape. A little lift. A little lift exactly. I just wanted people to be aware that those 4 shorts are on our website.
That's wonderful. It's such a fantastic website, and it just the tools you give people who want to promote the film. It's incredible. You just make it really easy to do. So I thank you and all the folks to help put that together.
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you both so much. This is exactly what we needed today and for the next. So you're going to be filmmakers for the Unity Czar? Is that the?
Yeah, bring it on.
That's what I'm hoping. I think that's brilliant. Put it out there because
I'm gonna. Every day I'm like, today I'm gonna write a letter to.
Write a letter. We'll sign it. I mean, that's honestly like you could really do that. We need like a.
I think it's actually like a pretty good idea.
With artists and social workers and all of that. Humanities,
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that's a great idea, and I could see it happening. Okay.
It needs to happen because I think conversation is the only way to.
It is, and listening.
Bring everyone together and listening.
Yeah.
Exactly. But
Exactly.
thank you so much. I love libraries.
Oh, thank you again so much.
Yeah.
It's just such a privilege to have you both here. Great conversation, amazing film, and it's going to keep us on the high road. That's the goal.
Good. All right.
Yes. Okay.
Well,
Thank you, each of you, for coming. And
Absolutely.
yes.
Here's to 2021.
Bring it on.
Yeah.
everyone
Let's get it going already in the right way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Good night.